Hey guys, good morning, afternoon, good evening. How are you guys doing? We have a really hefty topic to talk about today. So, opioids, that's a thing. So let's go ahead and get started with what we've got. So we're going to cover all the different things associated with opioids. So essentially, what this talk is going to be about is we're going to talk about different questions. Is what are they? How do they work? What are the issues associated with it? Medications and treatments available to you. So this is a pretty heavy topic right now, particularly back in October. There was some legislation that was passed over what we consider the opioid crisis. So what are opioids? Hello, everyone. Well, here's the breakdown. They're essentially a pain prescription medication. You can get street level opioids, but those are considered illegal and in the form of heroin. So it's best not to do that. They can give you a high feeling in addition to having relief of pain. You can develop a tolerance for opioids. You can also develop an addiction. Now, there's 3 different cell receptors that opioids affect, and those are within your neurons. That's mu, delta, and kappa. So let's dive in a bit and talk a bit about what we're gonna do here. So a lot of the information I'm discussing in this talk is readily found on the internet. However, it's important to check your sources to be certain they are reputable and accurate. NIH is a good source. Johns Hopkins is another good source. NCBI is a good source. Now, my sources can be found at the end of this particular talk, and I'll go through them. And I also post all of these slides on my website, scientistmel.com/resources. So you too can check into further reading and kind of learn a bit more as well. So opioids are in the news a lot due to the increasing population of individuals who are currently prescribed on them. Opioids are not free from risk, and many are worried that they are being overprescribed. Now, we see celebrity doctors continue contributing a bit to the addiction of particularly high-profile patients, the ones who happen to overdose on them. We hear legislation talks in Congress to address the opioid crisis. Are opioids harmful? What do they do? When does it get out of hand? What we're going to do is talk about what they are, how they work, the types, and how they are used, and what happens when addiction becomes a reality. So if you have questions in the chat, be certain to throw them in there. Toss me your questions and we'll knock it out as much as possible. A lot of what I'm talking about today, we've kind of covered in the hormones talk, which happened last Saturday. So let's do a little bit of a review in case you didn't catch that on what cell signalers are. So a cartoon little graphic here about, and if you were here last Saturday, it should look familiar. So when we're talking about cell signalers, this image is from Khan Academy. Now, for the hormones talk, I discussed how cell signalers work, these receptors. This is a bit of a refresher on cell signaling. What opiates do is interact with neuron receptors to kind of initiate our feelings of euphoria and feeling a bit high, and it also relieves pain in a way to where you manage it. So if you have chronic pain, opiates are really good at helping you manage those particular feelings that you get, those pain feelings. So let's take a look at this picture. So this was our little bit of a refresher where you have your ligand, your receptor, then a series of chemical messengers kind of relay. If you want to get more information on that, go and check out my hormones talk, which happened last Saturday. It's kind of similar. So the next picture that we have essentially is what 2 neurons kind of look like. So when we have these 2 neurons, you have one at the top and one at the bottom. we have how they talk to each other is neurotransmitters. This is how you get one neuron to signal another one to have a particular effect. Now, there are 3 different types of opioid receptors that we use in reference to for the prescription medications. There are more than 3, but the ones that we see that we have medications developed for are the mu, delta, and kappa. Now, this receptor is MOR, so it's the mu receptor. It activates this once you activate that receptor and you have your opioid attached to it, it will release a series of chemical messengers to have a response happen within the neuron. Now, it activates the release of what we call an inhibitory compound. That means it stops a response on another cell. Now, this is for what we call the GABA receptor, the GABA receptor on the next neuron. So if you stop and inhibit that receptor from happening, that gets rid of the pain. So essentially, an activation of an opioid pain receptor causes the pain to stop by shutting off another receptor. Now, neurons communicate with one another through what we call these neurotransmitters or these neurosignalers. So let's talk a bit more and a bit deeper in this what we're discussing. So different opioid neuron receptors have different mechanisms in how they work. So when we hear the term mechanism of action, it is talking about how a drug interacts with cells and causes a response. Much like I discussed in my last talk, these particular receptors are what we call GPCRs. They're G protein coupled receptors that require a series of chemical effectors or chemical messengers in order to get a response within the cell. Now, different medications affect different receptors. That's essentially kind of what medicine is. So anytime you have antihistamines or these histamine blockers, so they stop the production of histamine, which causes us to sneeze and get our watery eyes. Well, opioids stop the chemical, when you're going through it, stops the chemical series of reactions that initiate pain. So that's how this particular one works. Now, okay, so we have naturally occurring what we call endogenous opioids within our bodies that we normally feel. An example of one is endorphins. So some people get endorphins when they're running. I do. I get the runner's high. If I'm exercising really, 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 really hard, I know I'm highly receptive to endorphins. The other endogenous opioids that we have in our body are dynorphins, enkephalins, endomorphins, and nociception. Oh God, I can't pronounce this word, man. Nociceptions, septians. Oh God, this is not my field, guys, and I trip over my words sometimes. I meant to Google how to pronounce that, so I guess I have to mispronounce a word every once in a while. Now, it's important to note, a lot of people think opioid receptors are just in your mind and in your brain. They're not. They're in your spinal cord and also within your digestive tract. So let me catch up on the chat, see how you guys are doing. You guys are quiet. You guys quiet today? Make certain I'm going to reconnect, make certain everybody's there. So much fun. Everybody's quiet. There we go. I'm seeing more of the chat pop up that I had missed before on Restream. There we go. Now I see you guys. I had to reconnect it again. Technical difficulties. So I was about to say, why are you guys so quiet? So let me catch up on the chat here. All right. Hello, Doc, Jen, Mark, Bulls on. Fits my mood. Drag, what's up? Thank you for sharing. Drag is a patron. All right. Doc Fearsome is a patron. Hey, Mrs. Snarky. What's up? Hello, Sash. I'm finally catching. It's like you noticed all of the chat just. I have, I've reconnected several times. Funny enough, it was actually easy to break my addiction. I just had to want to. That probably worked for you. Thank you for spelling that out, Bull, in the chat with a nociception. I think it's nociception. That makes sense. How dare I be human? I know. I'm part Time Lord, because River Song, right? I'm part Time Lord. You managed to catch my show, Nether. Yay. Hey, guys. Goodness. I'm catching up. Hi. Hi is where I can find some opioids on the QT. You're funny, Stephen. Also, another patron in the chat. What's up? So if you have questions, please feel free to hit me up and let me know what you got. Apparently, it just suddenly just kind of dominoed all the way into the side here. All right. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about opioids. We've talked a bit about what their mechanism of action is, like a standard run. I didn't get into the heavy details. Hello, Mick. I didn't get into the heavy details on how they interact with one another, but it's important that you understand kind of the basis. All right. I have up on the chat. So what I want to do is kind of show you a little bit of these natural endogenous opioids. Let's have a look at this chart here. All right. So what we've got, I mentioned that there are 3 different opioid receptors, mu, delta, and kappa. Now there are others, but the ones we focus on in medicine are these M, D, and K. And here are some other examples of different receptors. They're naturally occurring or endogenous ligand. Ligand means it hooks up to the receptor. And what their pain medicine counterparts are. Do opiates mimic natural substances found in the body? Kind of. We do have like our endogenous opioids, like endomorphins and endorphins, that sort of thing. They fire off on the mu receptor. Now, you have an agonist and you have antagonists. So let me tell you a bit what those are. An agonist is a ligand or a substance that gets a receptor to respond. An antagonist is a ligand or a substance that stops a receptor from activating. So Benadryl is an antihistamine. It's an antagonist. So it stops those histamine receptors from being fired off. So essentially, it looks similar to a lot of the different things that would normally fire off histamine, that would attach to the histamine receptor and cause it to signal and fire off to release all of those unpleasant, watery eye, sneezing things. Well, an antagonist doesn't permanently bind to this receptor. It temporarily binds to that receptor and prevents that receptor from being turned on. So for opioids, those are agonists. Those turn on those pain receptors. So here, for instance, we've got mu, kappa, and delta. We're still learning a bit about some of these receptors. So keep in mind, science is always a work in progress, and we're learning more and more as we build up our foundation of knowledge. So an example of an agonist, morphine, that's a pretty commonly prescribed opioid. It attaches to the mu receptor. Now you can find mu receptors in the thalamus, hypothalamus, medulla, all of these different things kind of associated with the brain. Now remember, you can also have opioid receptors throughout your spinal cord and in your digestive system. So the ones that we've been focusing on, like I said, are mu, delta, and kappa, because those are the ones that are associated with the drugs that we got. I got the pronunciation right. Yay. Thank you, Mark. I'm addicted to placebos. I am too, but I'm also addicted to caffeine. No shame here, man. I have to have caffeine. All right. When your body is in shock, pain is dulled significantly as well. Yay for learning more. I joke, but I know addiction is a serious issue. I'm having a lot of trouble quitting cigarettes myself. It is hard. It's very hard. And it requires multiple forms of intervention. So let's talk a bit about opioids. Let's take a look at all of these different types of opioids that look kind of familiar. Hopefully you can read that all right. If not, that's all right. I'm going to tell you what they are. All right. So in this little graphic here, these are some of the most common examples of opioids on the market. Okay. There is heroin, but that's on the street. One of the biggest problems, particularly in the street world, is fentanyl. So we tend to see a high incidence of that in the drug market, as far as like the illegal one. Now you're likely to recognize a whole lot of these: codeine, hydrocodone, morphine, oxycodone, hydromorphone, and then fentanyl. And there's various different versions of these as well, like little subcategories within these. But these are kind of the main ones that we see. Opioids are highly effective in pain management, but it can become an issue if they're misused, overprescribed. They can also interact with other medications. So it's important to be extremely honest with all of your doctors if you are taking any kind of medication, because opioids can interfere with that. And if they're abused, that's where you kind of run into that, because you can develop a tolerance if they're used for a longer period of time. So dosage is extremely important. There is a risk with many opioids involving addiction. So let's talk a bit more about this. And I'm going to catch up on the chat. So we'll do that. Opioids. All right, let's see. Hey, what science is a work in progress? What humans aren't omniscient? No, we're not. We're not at all. We don't know everything. Isn't that funny? It's, I'm still part of, and this is something as an aside, I joined an anti-vaxxer Facebook group so I could learn. So I could learn a bit about what they're saying. And, some days I'm just like, yeah, I can't read this today. But a lot of these misconceptions is that they think that science should be an end-all be-all, that we can't alter information, or we can't alter a particular process if we get new information. It's like somehow this new information has made the science bad. So it's a big problem that I find, particularly with people who are inherently scientifically illiterate or willfully ignorant. They seem to have this idea that we can't possibly shift or change directions if we're given new information. But that is the very definition of progress. When you learn something new, you add it to your wealth of knowledge, and you're like, okay, here's a new thing that we just found that's associated with all this other stuff. Let's go get a stick and poke at it and see what happens. Like for some reason that we're just not able or not allowed to say, okay, well, this medication isn't working so well. Let's try this new one. I mean, that's most of medical science, but that doesn't mean that all the science that got up to that point was bad. It just means we've learned things and we've grown. Okay, checking up on the chat. I almost always vomit when given morphine. Got it for surgery and post when I had the operation on my tailbone. I am so sorry. That's pretty rough. Miss Shadow Kitty, quitting cigarettes is easy. I've done it 1,000 times. I'm still rooting for you. I'm rooting for you. You and Doc. I'm rooting for you guys. You do the best you can. Some days are not good days for battle, just do the best you can. Didn't react better when switched to codeine either. You might have an allergy of some sort. They should just make them taste like beets or lima beans or broccoli or something. Opioids, that is. Oh, yes. Okay, Ray. I believe long-term opiate addicts have a lessened pain tolerance. Yes. A high sensitivity to pain is a sign of an opiate addiction. You also require more of the opioid over time in order to relieve setting. So it can be a thing. I'm allowed by my prescription to take up to 6 doses daily. I usually take only 2 and try for none. A 1-month refill of the script usually gets 2 months and a couple of weeks. That's from Jen. Well, as long as you're managing your pain, and if you're honest with yourself and with your doctors, all of them, it shouldn't be an issue. Sometimes there is organized ignorance. Yes, Steve. Yes, there is. I joined a Facebook group of 30,000 people that are anti-vaxxers. I've learned a lot about organized ignorance. Thank you. You like my coffee mug? Yes. Wonder Woman. I'm not using my other one, which I have right here. Cam Girl for Science. If you're keen on getting one, I have these and I have bags on ScientistMel.com. So you too can share the love of science with me. Because, if you get on YouTube and you talk about a science, you're a Cam Girl for Science. And if you happen to be a girl, maybe I need to make one that's, gender neutral. Cam, or, like have Cam Boy for Science. Is that a thing? Might be. That would be Bill Nye, right? He's a Cam Boy for Science. So is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Demerol, yep. My coffee cup is Batman. All right. I dig on Batman. Morphine makes me itchy. I'm sorry. I'm having a good weekend, Keith. Thank you. I worked on stuff for the show yesterday, believe it or not, after lying on my couch recovering from the 4th until lunchtime. But there you go. Oh, goodness. Long-time opioid users have all sensation reduced. That's why during withdrawal, even the feeling of clothes on their body can feel incredibly painful and irritating, from Nether. Yeah. So it can be. I had Demerol once when I was in the ER with thought to be broken femur, hallucination city. You can hallucinate on opioids. That's something that I learned about when I was taking some pharmacology class once upon a time ago. There was one patient who saw spiders crawling all over the walls. So that must be nice. Hey, Andy. Goodness. So, gosh. No, okay. When I had my last kid, they gave me something that made me itch like crazy and no amount of antihistamine would help. I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to get those colors logos in the insulated cups. Yeah, that'd be cool, wouldn't it? Frustrated atheist, you're a Cam guy for science. I'm gonna see if I can get Peter to make me a Cam guy for science thing. And then you can have, what? We'll just all do it. Why not? We'll all be Cam guys and girls for science. Cam guy for science. I like Cam guy better. That sounds better than Cam boy. Cam boy sounds strange and a bit creepy, I think. Cam guy is better. I like it. Cam non-gender specific. Yeah. Yeah. Cam person. Cam human for science. Yeah. I need a Cam NB non-binary for science. That's sweet. Oh, I didn't know that, Jen, but that's all right. I didn't know that. That's okay. Opioid withdrawal is hell and seems like there's no way around the suffering of it, and medical assistance is inadequate. Okay. Lots of people continue to take them not to get high, but to avoid getting sick. True. All right. So I think I've caught up on that. You guys are letting me all kinds of interesting stuff. So let's talk a bit more. I'm going to talk a bit more about, I haven't gotten into this yet. All right. So opioid use does not come without risks. So what can happen, and this information comes in I have so many sources. Cam Primate for Science. I like that, Doc. I'm going to do that. So what can happen, there's lots of sources. Johns Hopkins, if you've not been to that website, it's a wealth of medical information. And they get into opioids, and it's a very easy, simple, broken down website. And I kind of like what they have there. So you have risks with pretty much everything, but opioid does have its own little brand of risks. If you have regular use of these particular medications, it does tend to increase your tolerance, and you can get dependent on it, which means you have to take them more often and in larger doses. Now, the longer term use does tend to lead to addiction for what doctors call the opioid use disorder. Now, with that said, opiates can also restrict your ability to breathe the higher the dose it takes. So you tend to have respiratory issues, and that's when it's misused. Now, it can also lead to fatal overdose if you take too much because it stops your breathing. So this particular thing increases if you have never taken an opiate before, or if you're taking other medications that can interact with that opioid. Now, opioids can also interact with other diseases. So not only can they interact with other medications that you're taking for another illness, but they can also interact with actual diseases too. So it should only be used for pain, and including alternatives if that pain control is not effective. Now, when you're going to the doctor, you need to give as much information to all of your doctors as you can about medications that you're taking, and any past medications or present drug use that you've had, to make certain that an opioid prescription is appropriate for you. There is some risk for addiction if you happen to have it in your family history for substance abuse. You may be at an increased risk because there is some genetics associated with addiction. So keep that in mind. Now, there are alternative treatments associated with pain management. So if these are things that you're concerned about, discuss fully with your healthcare provider all of the information. If you have questions, ask them. And sometimes I find it's helpful to write your questions out in advance, because sometimes when you're in the middle of a discussion with your doctor, you're going to forget things, and particularly if you're in a lot of pain. So write down your questions and take them with you. That's one way to kind of make certain you stay on target. Keep a pain journal. Keep a symptoms journal. This is not only helpful for your doctor, but this also helps you learn a bit more about your body. So you're going to be the best person to make decisions for you if you are educated in how your body works and what's going on, and you have a solid set. Write down your eating habits, stuff like that. So if you have any kind of disease where you have chronic pain, the more information you give your doctor, the best outcome and best case scenario you will have. So checking up on the chat again. You guys are super interactive today. I love it. Cam Sentient for AIs and alien life forms. There you go. Unfortunately, I can't use the word man for a gender neutral term. Well, it was meant for like over holistically everyone. Gosh, Dandy was on Percocet for months after breaking my femur. Getting off them was horrible. I bet. And I'll talk a bit about withdrawal symptoms as well. Oh, you were on perks when you had your wisdom teeth pulled. Frustrated atheist. I hated the way they made me feel. They don't sound very nice at all. The primary danger of opioids is the high develops a tolerance, so the abuser increases dose to get high. Eventually, the effective dose crosses the respiratory depression point. Boom, dead. There you go. On the nose, Jen. On the nose. Man, perks are horrible. I'm sorry. Yes. Also, the mix of acetaminophen with an opioid in one pill can be toxic to the liver in high doses. Acetaminophen is the culprit. Never take more than is recommended for this reason. Yes, you want to be careful about what drugs you're mixing with your opioids and alcohol. Might want to stay away from that. Actually, yes, stay away from that while you're taking these opioids. Fentanyl is probably the worst. My dad had a pump in his stomach that drip fed straight into his spine. Oh gosh, it was bad a few years until he passed. I'm sorry, Andy. Doctor won't prescribe oxy. Person goes to streets for relief. Don't know what they're getting. Boom, dead. True, Ray. That can happen. All right. Also, if you get a colonoscopy, make sure you get it done by a medical professional. Yes. And if you watched Oral Audacity last Sunday, don't do whiskey enemas. Doc gets into the reason for that. So you can check that out. And this Sunday, a new episode of Oral Audacity is coming up where we will be talking about David Avocado Wolf. And I have some surprise challenges for Doc, and I'm going to see if he can get through it. And for you guys, just to let you know, I have fixed the CloudBot chat bot on the Streamlabs. So FYI, it's collecting points. So I have Mel's Minions points. And what I'm going to do, I think every 6 months, I'm going to see who has the most points. I'm going to send you some merch. I'm going to send you some merch in the form of a mug, maybe some stickers, and like give you a little care package. Send you some merch for my highest points. And you can play different games. And some of you guys who are regular on YouTube streaming kind of know what that is. So yes, check it out. And then I believe we're going to get Bill Ledlow in on Oral Audacity in a couple of weeks. Doc told me he's talking to him. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, so let's talk about the Opioid Bill in 2018. What's that look like? Hi, Brenny. How are you doing? Hello, Robert. So let's talk about the Opioid Bill in 2018. There are important takeaways from that. So you can find, and one thing that I found that was particularly useful, with the Opioid Bill of 2018, you can kind of go through and see with professional websites. So believe it or not, anesthesiologists, those are the different websites you want to see because you want to see how that's going to affect your analgesics. So anesthesiologists, analgesics, those are like all the different pain type of things, that sort of thing, and how opiates affect that. Go to professional websites. Some of this information I pulled off of the American Dentistry Association. So, and they kind of break it down what the key takeaways are for a professional level. ScientistMel Smile Alone releases euphoria in my brain. Aw, Justin, that's so sweet. Thank you. Hey, Kirsten, glad you're back. All right. So the main takeaways from the bill that was signed into law October of 2018 are education. There are prescribing limits now, monitoring programs to help monitor people while they're on opioids, more stringent clinical guidelines, collaboration. So interdisciplinary collaboration is extremely important right now so that doctors talk to each other about who's on what. Non-narcotic alternatives are particularly important when it comes to the opioid bill. Disposal centers, where can people go to take their opioids when they're finished with them? That's extremely important. And also, they're looking at establishing communities where recovery is key, so more recovery centers and that sort of thing. Also, there's some new restrictions on Medicare. So I'm going to talk in a bit more into detail about this and catch up on the chat. So what does this mean, these continuing education thing, and all of that? Hey, guys. All righty. All right. So what this bill provides essentially is a whole bunch of new grants for prescribers. So for doctors to learn about the best pain management practices. So there'll be grants to help educate doctors to where they can go through and they know what the emerging technologies are, particularly in medicine and pain management. The goal is to have minimal use of opioids. Now, this will also require different agencies to submit to Congress a plan for medical professionals to certify to the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, that they've obtained this training. So it's important that they not only have this training, but they show that they have performed it. Now, and this is for the Schedule II controlled substances, which include pain management and also education on the prevention and treatment of addiction. There's a limit on the prescribing, how much they can do. So with this particular bill, requires the Department of Health and Human Services and Department of Justice to submit to Congress a report on the impact of federal and state laws and regulations that limit the length, quantity, or dosage of an opioid prescription. Now, for the monitoring program, there's a whole bunch of grants that are being made available to expand agency authorities to help states improve their various individual monitoring programs to kind of keep in mind. Because, if you get opioids from one doctor and then you go to another doctor, it's called shopping. It's drug shopping. So different states have different monitoring programs in place to try to keep up with who has what. And so there's new grants to help monitor it a bit better. There's new clinical guidelines. So the FDA has been charged to develop evidence-based opioid analgesic prescribing guidelines for indication-specific treatment of acute pain, okay? They have to be accompanied with a clear statement that basically says the intention to inform clinical decisions and not to restrict, limit, delay, or deny coverage or access by individual healthcare professionals. So what they're trying to do, this bill essentially requires the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare to publish guidelines for prescribing opioids to Medicare patients. ADD meds, as far as I know, they're not considered. This is, I believe, just exclusively for opioid painkillers for this particular bill, Kirsten. Brittany, I have done a video on mental health. I've talked about depression. I have a shortened version of that, and I've also have the longer live stream video. You can just, the Science of Depression, ScientistMel, you can look on my channel, or you can just put it in the search and you'll be able to find it. And I talk a lot about mental health on my channel, and I write different things on how to respond as a non-sufferer to a person who's suffering depression. How can you be helpful without causing further harm? So yes, I have talked at length, and that's based on input from people who suffer depression in addition to what the current science is. All righty. What else does this bill talk about? Interprofessional collaboration, collabs. So there's new technical assistance to help emergency departments and other acute care providers to kind of give best practices to minimize opioid prescribing in those settings. Now, this is kind of in line with the the Emergency Department Referral Program that, for instance, the American Dentistry Association has one already, because they can actually prescribe opioids. So it's really important that people are able to talk to each other really quickly to make certain that nobody's double prescribing. All right. Also, non-narcotic alternatives. These are really particularly important. So this expands the NIH. Now, if you're not familiar with the NIH, this is the National Institutes of Health. So NIH is a wonderful resource, and they have very comprehensive information. It can get a bit overwhelming to go through that particular site, but if you're willing to sit there and dig, it has all kinds of updated information, particularly in medical science, and they have topics on everything. So, non-narcotic alternatives. So, NIH is being expanded and is rapidly diverting funds for high-impact research in response to public health threats, such as fostering the development of other alternatives for pain management that are not narcotic-based. So, drug disposal centers, I mentioned that. More grants to expand the number of authorized drug collection centers so people can safely dispose of their unused opioids. This also clarifies the FDA's authority to require manufacturers to offer safe disposal options as well. So, disposal packaging, that sort of thing. So they're also charging the manufacturers to have safe disposal practices, in addition to having more centers where you can take your medication when you're finished. The whole communities of recovery. This bill is charging agencies to essentially develop addiction recovery centers and peer-to-peer support in areas that are particularly high with drug overdose rates. It allows authorities technical assistance also for state Medicaid agencies to provide housing-related support and care coordination for those who are recovering from opioid addictions. As far as Medicare, for those of you on Medicare, this takes CMS with developing a way to identify outlier prescribers of opioids to Medicare Part D patients. Now, this is based on based on specialty and essentially a geographic area. So if you're on Medicare, this bill can affect a bit on how it is that you gain access to opioids. Let me check up on the chat. Oh, I'm so glad you like my Science of Depression videos, Kirsten. I'm sorry you're suffering from major depression, anxiety, and social anxiety. Brittany, I have anxiety, and I'm very open about it because, it's kind of like getting a cold for me. Sometimes I have an anxiety attack or a panic attack, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, you just got to ride it through. It doesn't happen as much as it used to because I've developed stronger coping skills, but I still have crippling anxiety sometimes. It happens. It happens that it can happen to anybody. It doesn't have a target audience. It can happen to anyone. So I hope you're managing all right. All right. This is so restrictive in the VA that we are being cut off even with demonstrated need for RA. Oh, I'm sorry, Robert. Oh, goodness. I know I'm catching up on the chat. I'm sorry. I know, Andy, I know you suffer depression and anxiety as well. Yep. Hey, Mel, how about the science of ibogaine that supposedly readjusts brain chemistry to get off opioids? Hey, I will check into that. So I'll check into that. There's so much available. I could talk a lot about opioids, and we're only restricted. I have 12 minutes left. We're kind of restricted to just a short period of time, when you're doing an hour. So I tend to cover the basics, but I can, for future episodes, get more specific in, the medications that they use to help with that. So let me show you this graphic here really quickly. And look at this. It looks like a big old Ferris wheel of addiction. I did not mean for it to look like, it just came out and I just realized it looks like the Ferris wheel of opioid addiction. This is not funny. It's not funny at all. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, I did not pick a graphic. This looks entirely too happy to have opioid addiction. It's just missing flashing lights, isn't it? I just, oh my goodness. Hey, Agnostic Aussie. Oh, like good gravy. All right, so let's get through the opioid addiction Ferris wheel here. need to like change my change my graphic in the future. All right. Addiction can be highly individual. Someone may experience all or just a few of these symptoms, and it's important to stay in contact with your doctors, all of them, so that you do not develop a dependence on these medications. So, signs of addiction can have craving, sweating, slurred speech, shallow breathing, can affect your relationships, your finances. You have pain sensitivity. You have a reduced sex drive. Sometimes you're euphoric. Sometimes you're discontent. You can have chronic constipation as well as small pupils. So let's talk a bit more about this, and I'll catch up on the chat and get off of the Ferris wheel of addiction. Boy, I had not finished on my coffee when I was putting that together today. Oh, gosh. So, signs of addiction. You can usually self-diagnose. And I've kind of mentioned these. It's uncontrollable cravings. You have these uncontrollable cravings, and you have an inability to actually control your opioid use. And then it in turn affects your relationships and your finances. It can affect your job. You stop wanting to take care of yourself, bathing. A lot of these different things, like a domino effect. Your whole body can crave and sweat. Your mood is altered. And then I mentioned all of the other different symptoms: sensitivity to pain. You're developing a tolerance and becoming dependent on this particular medication in order to, feel better. All right. So the asahq.org, asahq.org, analgesics. It's like an analgesics website. They have a lot of information, and it's very useful information on what you should do if you or someone you know has an opioid addiction. Well, the first step is to kind of, find a physician or another health care professional who you feel comfortable speaking with and talking to. Your physician can also refer to a medical professional who is in addiction medicine. It's a good idea to go to the prescribing doctor and find out, what's going on and who they know in that particular field. If you're uncomfortable going to the prescribing doctor, go to a different one. You don't have to go to the same doctor. You can also go on the American Society of Addiction Medicine's website and look for addiction in your area. The American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry also has an online patient referral program, so you can check that out. You can also try the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administrations. That's SAMHSA. They have a toll-free helpline. So it's like 1-800-662-HELP. So if you forget the 1-800, just remember 662-HELP. You can also visit the SAHMSA's Behavioral Health Treatment Services Locator. So remember, SAMHSA. Just Google that. That's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have all kinds of information on their website that you can go and check out. There's also a state's agencies webpage that helps you find agencies, state-based industries that could have special programs for you or the person in your life who's struggling with addiction. Now, if you're not the person who has the addiction and you're a caring friend or a loved one, you can also do things for yourself to kind of help. There's the National Institute on Drug Abuse, NIDA. So it's an affiliate of NIH. You remember I mentioned NIH before. NIDA. They offer this type of advice. You need to assure your friend or loved one that the addiction can be managed successfully, but acknowledge that it may take several attempts at treatment to find the best approach. So if your friend or loved one refuses to seek help, A confrontational intervention is not recommended. These encounters can escalate into violence or backfire in other ways. Try to convince the person to consult with a physician. Your health and your safety are extremely important as well. All right, let me catch up on the chat here, and then we'll talk about withdrawal symptoms. I'd add talk to your pharmacist as well if you can. They can help answer many questions and can speak with your doctor. Yes, if you want to know about drugs, talk to a pharmacist, not your doctor. I mean, like, your doctor's going to know about drugs, but your pharmacist is your expert in medicines. So if you have heavy questions, freaking go to your local pharmacy and say, hey, I have a question for your pharmacist. And they will answer. They are your expert in medicine. So there you go. Science Cam Girl Mel, that's right. I got my mug right here. So don't forget, by being on live streams, you rack up points, and you can check your points, I think, by, exclamation point points. And then I also hand out points. And I'm going to start and just so you guys know, I'm going to start handing out points for our challenges on our Audacity. Is it real or not? So if you can guess whether or not a product is an actual product, I'm going to go back through the chat and find everybody and give you points for getting it correct. So you can play along with us. All right. Sunday, 3 p.m. Central Time. That's where I'm at. Oh, goodness. I always hate it when people equate depression to being sad. Yes, Andy, I agree with you. It's not just being sad. You're not just, I'm having a sad day. It's your brain not, it's a malfunction of neurotransmitters in your brain. There's nothing you can do about it. And it sucks. And I'm sorry. I love it when video and audio are slightly out of sync. It looks so funny. It's like a dubbed version of me. It's pretty funny. Am on an oxycodone regimen for pain from a pain management physician. Through this doctor in therapy, my arthritis pain is managed with minimal use of narcotics. So that's good to hear, Aged Desert Rat. I'm happy for you. They synced up again. None of these orgs are any use for non-Americans. I thought this was directed at a world audience. Well, I'm sorry, Asong is a journalist. I don't know where you're living, but I know the NHS in the UK has a lot of information on opioid addiction. I would say, depending on what country you're on, if you want, I can find some organizations for you. Just hit me up on Twitter, or if you're on Periscope, a song. Let's see. Just hit me up on Twitter. Send me a message there where you are. You can direct message me, and I'll send you a link to different organizations in your country. I'm willing and happy to help you. Since I'm primarily U.S. based and on the U.S. side of things, I gather my information for that particular thing. But I do have a large UK audience as well. And so the NHS does have information there on their websites for that. So just hit me up on Twitter and let me know where you are, and I will find some good resources for you. I'm happy to do that. Mel, I honestly think your videos have saved my life. Oh, Brenny, I hang in there. If you're spiraling right now, just remember, just ride through the storm. This is temporary. It will stop at some point. And reach out to people on Twitter if you're on Twitter, and if you have a support network, don't be afraid to ask people for help. And I try to check on my friends who suffer depression and just say, hey, how you doing? Thinking about you. So if you're a non-sufferer and you know somebody who's suffering depression, send them a message saying, I was thinking about you. How are you doing today? Just simple, basic messages like that mean a lot. All right. So let's see. I'm checking up. Having support does help folks cope. That's absolutely right. Okay. Hey, Maddie. All right. So let's take a look at this graphic, and we're going to wrap up soon. So withdrawal, it's not fun. So there's also a website called the American Society of Addiction Medicine. I'm sorry, I was stung by a wasp yesterday, those flying, rude, mean, awful things, and it itches still. It's not painful, but it still itches. Anyway, you can have all kinds of different withdrawal. You can crave the drug. You can have all kinds of anxiety, irritability, feel cold. You can have tremors and shaking, diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain, insomnia. These are all not pleasant. Now, these particular withdrawal symptoms generally last around 3 to 5 days. Now, according to the American Society of Addiction Medicine, these withdrawals can be difficult or even dangerous. If you try to quit cold turkey, that's not recommended. It can lead to stronger cravings and continued use. The safest way to kind of cope with these withdrawal symptoms is through medically supervised treatment. Now, this generally tends to include different medications, counseling, support. Some medications used to relieve withdrawal are like methadone, Subutex. These medications can also be used as long-term maintenance medicine for opioid dependence. So this medication, there's also a medication that's called clonidine. Now, this can be used during withdrawal to help cope with anxiety and agitation, the muscle aches you get, sweating, runny nose, any cramping. It does not help reduce cravings, though, but it does help with those other symptoms. Now, the addiction medicine physician that's working with you may also prescribe other medications to help you with nausea, vomiting, and any insomnia that you experience. So let me catch up on the chat here and talk a little bit more. We're coming towards the end. Got to wrap it up soon. Let's see. So symptoms of an opioid overdose. It's really important you keep this in mind. How do you know if somebody's overdosed? Slow, shallow breathing, extreme sleepiness, inability to talk, blue skin color, dark colored lips, snoring, or even gurgling sounds can be symptoms of an opioid overdose. So what do you do? Okay, so first you want to try to wake them up if at all possible to get a response. Rub your knuckles on their breastbone, just kind of wake them up. If they don't respond, if they do respond and they wake up, keep them awake, call 911. All right. Now, if they don't respond and they're still asleep and you've tried waking them up, shaking them around, call 911. It's not likely that you have this laying around. Naloxone, that tends to be the medication that they use to reverse the effects of opioid overdose. I wouldn't recommend giving that out unless you've gone through this before and your doctor has prescribed this just for this case for this person. I haven't heard that actually used in-house, but there. If breathing is shallow or not there, or if the skin is blue, it looks like they're lacking oxygen. Dark colored lips, start rescue breathing, mouth to mouth, and tilt the head back. CPR can save a life here. If the person doesn't have a pulse or not breathing, again, CPR. While you're waiting for emergency responders, stay with the person. Don't leave them alone. If you have to, vomiting might happen. Place the individual in a recovery position on their side, basically laying on their side in case they were to vomit. You don't want them to aspirate and breathe in their own vomit. So on their side, down, top leg on the floor, and keep the person from rolling back onto the stomach or onto their back. These are all kind of important. So opioids, medical treatments, just wrapping this up, just like everything else in the world, have risks. Dosage is key in minimizing hazards and addiction. There need not be a crisis in opioids if they are managed properly. Doctors cannot be responsible for everything that goes wrong. It's also up to us to be honest with our doctors and ourselves if we're going to tackle this issue. Talk about opioid usage. Normalize the discussion. There's no shame in managing pain. We need to be careful, though. Have the discussion. If you have questions, ask multiple doctors. Be certain to be honest with all of your doctors about your medications. Write questions down in a book. Have a little journal just for your doctor. Keep up with when you're taking things, when you feel pain. The more information you give your doctor, the better the outcome you will have. And educate yourself with understanding the delicate balance of your body and the importance of having a good quality of life, because that's what it's about. All right, let me catch up on the chat one more time, and then we'll go in. And my next one says hormones on it, not opioids. So it's a freaking typo. Let me see. Sometimes you need help to get through it. Yes, absolutely. My Twitter is always open for anyone that needs to chat. Thank you, Andy. That's really nice of you. Rude is not a word I've heard about a wasp. I like it. Well, you know. Depression, suicide, anxiety, and PTSD, I know all too well. My Twitter is open to everyone. That's Os Man Cometh. I suffer from it too. Yes. Riders on the Storm. Now that song makes sense. There you go. You guys, if you're low, remember, it's temporary. You will get through this. Your depression and anxiety lies. Just try to remember they lie, and stick to what the facts are and try to use that to help you. That's what gets me through my anxiety, remembering what the facts actually are. All righty. I think the secret to breaking an addiction is realizing that you will go through withdrawals and being prepared to put up with them for that very few days. It's even the same for caffeine. That's a good idea, Mark. All righty. Let me see. Opioids, it's a trap, doorknob head. I don't know. I think if you manage it all right and you don't stay on it long term, or you're working very closely with your doctor, it can be useful. Slow reduced dosages, approximately 10% for 5 to 7 days, can get someone to greatly lower the withdrawal symptomology when the final 0 daily dose point is reached, ideally being down to 10% of the original total. Well, I would say, Jen, make certain, if that's the case, go and check it out with your doctor. And everyone is different, so addiction is different with each individual. Exactly. You can exhibit one or multiple symptoms. Oh, goodness. Choking on vomit from an OD is what killed Jimi Hendrix. Yes, it is, Miss Shadow Kitty. That was awful. It's just awful. It's not cool. Depression lies. So just imagine depression is Trump. I'm not helping. Oh, my goodness. All right, so let's wrap this up. Let's look at the questions answered. And it wasn't on hormones. That's a typo. What I might start doing for you guys is, if I have a typo, I'll tell you. Anybody who points out my typos are going to get extra points on Streamlabs. How about that? Let's do that. I like that. All right, so opioids, not hormones. What are they? How do they work? What are the issues associated with that? And what are the medications and treatments, particularly for pain management and as well as addiction? The breakdown. We broke it down today. I am DJ Enzyme. Put it up and we break it down, right? Oh my goodness. DJ Enzyme here with the mad beats and tunes of science, and breaking it down. All right. The medication can give a high feeling, but it can also relieve your pain issues, like your pain that you're feeling. We've talked a bit about that. Tolerance can be developed, as can addiction, and it affects your neuron cell receptors. The 3 main receptors we discussed were mu and kappa. We talked about how the mu receptor actually gets activated and then it stops. So I need to refresh. Okay. I refresh on vMix. Okay, sorry. We are almost done, and I got your message. Refresh. Where did I leave off? Okay. Go back through the breakdown really quickly because apparently I needed to refresh. So, pain prescription meds can give a high feeling. Tolerance can be developed as well as addiction. and an effect on cell receptors. So that way, the mu, delta, and kappa, those are the 3 receptors that are primarily associated with opioids. All right. Where can you find me? You can find me on the internet, ScientistMel.com. If you want the resources associated with this talk, ScientistMel.com/resources. I have a shop, ScientistMel.com/shop. Patreon.com/ScientistMel. If you like what I do and can throw a couple dollars my way, that'd be helpful, because I pay for things to do this. So Periscope.com, periscope.tv.com/ScientistMel. Those of you watching on Periscope, I'm on YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. Help me out there. I'm also on Facebook and Twitch. And if you have questions, please, you can find me on Twitter. Message me there. My DMs are open. You can also leave a comment in here. You can leave a comment down in the chat at the bottom of this particular thing. Message me. You can contact me through my website, through email as well. Find me. Let me know what you want to talk about, because this is all developed from your suggestions. And I believe next Saturday we're talking about science communication. Join me tomorrow with Doc Savage for our comedy show, Audacity. I have challenges for him, and we'll see if he can rise to them. And we're going to completely and utterly demolish David Avocado Wolf, who has me blocked on Twitter. We will be getting blocked by merchandise for David Avocado Wolf, as well as Deepak Chopra, where proceeds will be donated to actual science. All of it. I don't keep the money for any of the blocked by series. So keep that in mind. So yes, or a PC better than shipping UPS. So that's it. I want to thank patrons. I've got the little ticker going. So thank you to my patrons. They help me keep the lights on, and it means the world to me. And they get extra stuff like discounts on my website, early access to audio podcasts, which is the audio version of this. Leonator, my producer, he has a Patreon too. So if you can throw him a couple bucks a month, that'd be great. Well, I do pay him. My Patreon money also goes to Bullionator, who helps things run smoothly, and I'm super happy that he has joined my team. So thank you, Bullionator. All right. Yes. So I will see you guys tomorrow. I can't wait for the next episode of Audacity. I have stopped trying. I'm not even going to try to make Doc watch his language, because that would be like trying to put a dam on the ocean. So we're not going to do that. So it's a bit sweary. It's a bit of a sweary show, but it's a comedy show. So I hope you guys will join me for that. It's a lot. And points. Don't forget, Streamlab points. Check it out. And I will send you guys squishy science hugs. Have a fantastic Saturday. Bye. Thank you for being here.